Crystal Stars 1 chapter by USSExplorer. The sun was just creeping into the room and I growled as I looked at my private datapad. It was the one that contained the flight logs of the ship that brought me to Coruscant and the worlds of the Sith Empire, and was stored in my inventory, but that was not what was making my anger grow. What was grating on my nerves was the fact that every idea I had about how to delay, weaken and counter Sidious's plans seemed to boil down to the same underlying issue: money. Whatever I could think of, beyond just assassinating the current senator, which TPTB had suggested with the Sever the Head quest, would actually make things worse in the long term, were long, drawn-out plans that would take time, effort and money. Lots and lots of money. I need to figure out how I'm going to go against what is probably a massive, secret war chest that the Sith have built up over a millennium, if not longer, I muttered as I looked at the list. Develop my own army. Not clones, but loyal. Take control of a megacorp. Found my own force order. Accelerate the development of certain tech. X-wings, personal shielding, etc. Discover and colonize a safe harbor for Jedi Force users. Eliminate key people. It was a short list on the surface, but each choice led to a separate document that held further ideas. Yet none could truly advance until I had access to millions, if not billions, of credits. I wonder if I can get Dooku to become Count without leaving the Jedi. I mused, figuring that the title must have made him rich. That was based on what was seen of his private estate in the Clone Wars cartoons, but there was always a chance the title was more political than financial, like many minor members of the royal family in Britain in my past life. Sure, they all lived very comfortably, but I think only Queen Elizabeth had much in the way of financial holdings, and even then, she wasn't close to being the richest person in Britain. Right, so how do I make money? I muttered as I tapped my finger on the table beside the pad as I sat quietly in my quarters. I could invest in companies that create the battle droids used by the Trade Federation, but even then, I need cash to do so, I growled once more. Maybe I should just rob someone, I muttered with a small chuckle which petered out as I started to consider the random idea. Maybe I could rob someone. It's not like everyone in the galaxy is nice and deserves what they have. And I could use compulsion too. My self-discussion trailed off. A small hatch in the wall near the door opened and a scuttle droid rolled in. The things wandered around the temple constantly cleaning the floors while other droids cleaned the walls or carried supplies back and forth. Buggers are everywhere, I mumbled as the droid sped around the room. As I watched it speed around, my mind wandered as to how much access this droid, and its siblings, had to the temple. They had to have access to every room in the place: sleeping quarters, training rooms, the hangar bay and council chambers. Heck, probably even had access to the holocron V. Okay. Now that could be useful, I thought as I focused on the small tan-brown droid. If droids have a way into the vault, then it is possible I could use it to gain access to the holocrons. I needed to get my computing skills to higher levels, and I remembered I had a quest to do just that. I called up the quest lists and expanded Just Don't Get Caught. Okay, the rewards don't kick in until I'm 16 it seems, but nothing is stopping me from getting to the base levels earlier. And the 3 short-term quests I have don't overlap, so I don't have to worry about taking time for them from working on my other skills. Those 3 quests were Competent Duelist, Trainee Space Ranger and Trainee Space Ace. The first was just a push reward to get Makashi to Professional, one before the year was out, while the 2 trainee quests were to get the piloting skills for Space and Atmosphere to Adept, one in the same time frame. They had come to me once I had started flight training after the Initiate trials had ended, about 3 weeks ago. It was interesting that Dragon Clan was being taught by Nightlon, one of the 4 Jedi the Council of First Knowledge had recommended for me to take as my trainer. I was not going to refer to whomever it was, if it was anyone, as I was still considering just going solo, though I was less keen to do so now that I realized Sidious knew about me, as master, as the term held issues with granting someone power ownership over me. How Jedi didn't see that. Anakin must have felt the same. I didn't understand, but put it down to institutionalized blindness. I was drawn out of my thoughts when the cleaning droid smacked into my foot. Damn it, you little, go away, I growled. The droid ignored me, but a small purple notice in my log drew my attention. Force power usage, compulsion power failed. Half XP was granted for the attempt. Note: droids are immune to compulsion, mind probe, memory rub, huh. I mumbled as I read the notice. I could get XP for compulsion by using it on droids, though it wouldn't work successfully. That was broken as hell, but I was so going to exploit it over the coming years. Assuming mind probe and memory rub were what I suspected they were, reading and manipulating minds, and that they were advanced forms of compulsion like how lightsaber TK was to TK, then if I could get all 3 to high enough levels, I could simply take control of certain individuals. Though it would take a long time to get the powers leveled up, as compulsion was 250 FP a pop and I had to assume the others would be even more expensive, taxing to use. Something to work towards, without making it a quest, I added to prevent my interface from offering another quest. This was going to be a slow, background plan that I didn't want to interfere with my current, and future, short-term quests. Was I abusing the powers I had? Probably, but why shouldn't I use and abuse them to give myself the best chance to succeed and survive in this galaxy? I went back to watching the droid as it continued to move around the room and hit it with compulsion until I ran out of FP, then became bored as it kept cleaning. Then I began to think about where the main control system was for the cleaning and maintenance droids in the temple, and how difficult it would be to access that room. I imagine it is behind multiple locked doors with cameras and other security measures in place to avoid tampering. Entering the room would be difficult. However, if I was to install a worm into a cleaning droid, it might upload that to the central computer. If programmed correctly, I could have the computer transfer everything that happened in the temple to an outside server, provided it had network access, which I could then pursue at my leisure. Damn, that seems like, fuck. I spat out as my train of thought led me to realize that I may have just found a huge flaw in the temple's security. I lifted my datapad and quickly opened another file. This file covered the ways that the Sith could monitor, spy on the Jedi. I suspected they must have access to Senate records, especially since Palpatine was a senator, but I hadn't considered they could actively spy on the Jedi themselves. Great, so I just found a potentially major security flaw. I would assume the Jedi have closed that flaw, but if they haven't, my voice trailed off as I stared at the droid as it left my room. Well fuck. I dropped the datapad back in my inventory and exited the room, planning to find someone to tell. But who to talk to? Dooku and Sifo Dyas were out. While both were respected and Sifo Dyas sat on the High Council, both talked regularly with Palpatine so he could ask them subtlety who had closed the flaw, which would draw his attention to me even more. Faye, while someone held in high regard by other Jedi, was not a regular to the temple, so I doubted she had much understanding of the daily activities that went on here. Lon was. New knight, so lacked authority. Guess I need to find Yoda or Windu then, I murmured to myself as I walked the quiet corridors. Now just to find them. The most likely places at this time in the morning were either the mess halls or a meditation room. But which way to go? Damn, I spat as I crashed to the floor having bounced off someone and fallen backwards. Cameron, are you alright? A male voice asked, and I looked up to see Master Giat looking down at me with a slightly creased brow. Yes sir. Just was lost in thought. I replied as he helped me stand before I gently patted my robe. Sorry for not looking where I was going. I believe we were both guilty of that, Cameron. He countered as he reached down and picked up a datapad. What has you moving so fast this early in the morning? I opened my mouth to mutter out a half-hearted excuse when it occurred to me that Master Giat might just be the Jedi I needed to talk to. He was a High Council member and a Sentinel, a Jedi charged with hunting down dark side users and their influence across the galaxy. Sure, he and the rest were missing the Sith Lord in the Senate, but otherwise, I felt he was competent at his job. I think I've found a security breach, I said slowly. I might be wrong, but I have a feeling that I'm not. Giat's brow creased as he looked down at me. And what is this breach you believe you have found? I mentally thanked him for not just ignoring my concern as I think some of the other High Council members might. I paused as another cleaning droid, though it could have been the same one as from my room, shot across the floor behind him. I would rather discuss that in private. Away from anything that could monitor us, I said slowly, tilting my head to the droid. Giat's eyes caught my movement before drifting skywards for a moment. Perhaps that would be for the best. Come. He turned and walked back the way he had come from and I quickly fell into step beside him. I saw the recordings of your performance in the initiate trials, he began as we entered an elevator, and read the reports from the Council of First Knowledge. I had expected you to do well in the trials, but phasing, teleporting, and showing an interest in Makashi. He chuckled and shook his head. There is doing well, and then there's rubbing everyone else's faces in the dirt. That was not my intention. I countered slowly as we exited the elevator and I noted we were now on levels that initiates were restricted from going to unaccompanied. I simply knew I had to think outside the box if I wanted to do well. Giat laughed and shook his head. You did more than, well, Cameron. You shattered the course record for the obstacle course. And I mean the temple record, not the initiate one. And you made Master Dooku smile. What? I couldn't help but stumble and blurt out at that comment. While I respected Dooku's ability with Makashi and enjoyed the gruff no-nonsense manner he had, probably as it reminded me of my old life, I had never seen the slightest hint the man could smile. Giat laughed once more as he glanced at me. He smiled. Sure, he tried hard to hide it, but I have known him since I was an initiate. We entered a small room that was an office of some sort as Giat slipped around the desk and sat while indicating for me to do the same. Now, what is this concern you have? He asked and I explained what I had considered about the droids and how someone could use them to monitor everything happening at the temple, even in areas restricted to many such as the council chambers and archives if the droids had access. Through my short explanation, which avoided getting into why I was thinking about the droids and their programming, he sat there quietly and when I finished, he leaned back in his chair and tapped his forefingers on his chin while his hands were overwise interlocked. I admit your concerns are valid. The droids, cameras, and external data requests are all recorded by a central computer core. And while that is regularly checked to ensure it is free of external programs, it does link to a secure mainframe within the Senate. He tapped his forefingers a few more times against his chin. I believe that this mainframe is also secure, but we are talking about politicians here, Normally that little comment would earn a small smile from me, but not today. Who would have access to the mainframe? I asked. Hopefully, I didn't come off as too curious aware, but I had to get him thinking about the potential dangers that existed. To my knowledge, that core is for the Chancellor, their staff, and select senators. If any of them wished to know about what went on within the temple, they are free to do so. However, if one or more of them were persuaded to provide copies of those activities, then we could be looking at a serious problem. It looked like he agreed with me, but the way his brow seemed to both lower and rise made me think he'd thought of something else that was a bigger threat than just knowing what Jedi did every day within the temple. We sat in silence as I pondered just what else beyond droid recordings could be on this Senate computer, and Master Giet's brow furrowed as he considered whatever was going through his head. "Thank you for bringing this to me, Cameron," he said as he suddenly leaned forward and placed his hands on the table. "I will discuss this with the High Council, and we will take appropriate actions to ensure this potential security breach is removed." His words were calm and relaxed, but the furrows in his brow didn't vanish. "Yes, sir." I hoped he could convince them to do something about it, but until I knew for certain, I was going to have to be very careful of what I did and said around the droids, or in any room with recording devices. He nodded and leaned back as a small smile came to his face. "Now, what drove you to focus on Makashi when almost no one, knights and masters included, do so?" I shrugged. The main part of the combat trail was one-on-one combat. Of the 3 forms I had been shown, the only one that was designed for such combat was Makashi. Giet nodded as his smile grew a touch. "Yes, that is true. Most Jedi choose Sorzu or Ataru, though I prefer Sheen. And that is because I find myself dealing with an inordinately large number of blaster-wielding foes on my missions." He chuckled at what I had to assume was a private joke. "Are you staying with Makashi?" Again, I shrugged. "For now, yeah, though from my reading of history, I do know there are far fewer Sith around than when I was born." That drew another chuckle. "Perhaps later I will study another form, but not until I feel I have mastered my current one." And unlike the others, I had a built-in system that told me when I had done that. Once Makashi was at Master 1, I planned to try to train up Shicho and Sorazu. Hopefully, by the time of Episode 1, I would have at least mastered those 3 forms. So you will be taking Dooku as your master?" Giet asked as he leant forward. "I have not decided on whom I wish to learn from, though all of the options given to me by the council have their strengths." Giet shook his head, though he continued to smile. "Spoken like a diplomat. Your grandfather's teachings, I assume?" "Yes, sir." No, that wasn't why I was being careful, but it was the best reason that anyone had come up with so far as to why I hadn't instantly picked a trainer. The others were pushing me to take various Jedi, though none suggested Dooku, and that was only after they got over their annoyance that I was being fast-tracked. Now that I thought about it for a second, Sir had never been annoyed. She had simply given me a massive smile and a nod before asking who was to be my master. Damn, I hated that term, so I could only imagine how Anakin would feel about it. Very wise. Very wise. Now, is there anything else you wish to discuss? It is time for the morning meal and, while I do not know about you, I am famished. She asked as he stood. No, sir, I replied as I stood, even as I wished I could tell him about Palpatine and everything else, but the instructions from my power had said I couldn't just tell someone about what was to happen. I had tested that last week when talking with Sifo Dyas. Instead of saying Palpatine was a Sith Lord, I'd called him a smelly lady. It seemed I was going to have to hunt for the proof I needed after all. He nodded and we walked out of the office to begin the day. May I join you? I lifted my head at the request and saw Master Faye standing on the opposite side of the table that I was using in the archives, a slight smile on her face as our eyes met. I nodded and the elegant Jedi slid onto the bench beside me. If I may ask, what are you reading? She asked calmly. I shifted the datapad to her as I answered. I'm learning about my family, I replied. The datapad was currently showing an overview of Satel Shan's time with the Order. After getting the clearance from the Council of First Knowledge, I'd spent an hour a day in the following week researching and reading about whatever I could find about Revan, Bastilla and now Satel. The information contained in the archives, or at least the freely available information, was nothing useful, impressive, and did nothing to improve on what I knew of Revan and Bastilla from the KOTOR video games. Satel, however, while mainly just a long list of bullet points about her career, was more helpful. I had never played Tor, so apart from the name, I knew nothing about her. Ah, Satel Shan. I remember reading about her when I was a Padawan. She slid the datapad back to me and her smile curved upwards. It is a shame the public records are so dry. I felt my brow lift at her comment. For a normal child, it would have seemed innocent, but I caught the less than subtle markers suggesting she knew more than she was telling. Did Satel, or my great-grandparents, leave a recording or diary? Maybe even a holocron? I asked, figuring I'd play her game to see if it led somewhere. Plus, the more time I got to spend around the lady the better. She easily put any woman I had ever met to shame with her beauty and the way she carried herself. I believe that Grandmaster Satel did create a holocron after the war with the Sith, but I never checked if there was one from Revan or Bastilla. Though I highly doubt it has survived to the present day. Ignoring their non-accepted views of marriage and family, the Sith attacked and held Coruscant during the war when Sitel was Grand Master of the Order. She paused and tapped her fingers on the table. Still, if they had created a holocron, then I imagine Sitel may have tried to save and protect it from the Sith. Revan was a curiosity, too many, including me. Truly, I blurted out, and Faye's smile turned into a small grin. Yes, when I was but a Padawan, I admit to finding the story of the prodigal knight most enjoyable. Her eyes wandered off to a spot before returning her gaze to me, her eyes seeming to bore right into my soul. If I was a normal child, I would have squirmed under the intensity of her gaze, but I did not. You have something of him in you. Oh, your face is different, as are your colorings, but I can see that same, certain something to you. The same energy that he seemed to radiate is within you. Many cultures have their own words or phrases to describe it, but I like Jatiakara. Jatekora. Jatiakara. She corrected quietly. It translates into basic as, a course to steer by. It implies that someone has been touched by the Force, fate, or some other power, to be or do something important. Though I imagine the galaxy at large tries its best to keep such people limited. She laughed a soft, musical laugh, and brushed a loose strand of hair out of her eyes. What do the tattoos mean? I blurted out, as I had missed them when we had first met as I was distracted by her, but now I was curious about them, and I felt my cheeks heat up. I almost engaged Player's mind, but I didn't want to rely on that power too much or risk her wondering why I had suddenly become so in control of my emotions. Oh sure, the Jedi might preach about letting go of your emotions, but I was less than a year into their training, and I knew that other Jedi showed emotion. Case in point, the lady sitting with me, whose emotions were clear to see at my abrupt, okay rude, question. She continued to smile even as her fingers traced the twin lines on her left cheek. You are the first Jedi I have met in a very long time who has asked me about them. She sighed and looked away from me, towards one of the windows in the upper walls. They are a reminder of something that happened a long time ago. I felt my brow rise in surprise at her seeming admission of having cared deeply, if not loved someone long ago, and I kept my mouth shut as she continued to look out of the window, her brow having drooped, as had her smile. Figuring she needed time, I returned to reading about my great-great-whatever niece. How does your training go? I lifted my head to see she was now looking at me once more, her face calm again. I shrugged. It's fine. The flight lessons with Night Lawn are helping to pass the time and I am learning more every day. And, she probed, her lips twitching upwards at my neutral answer. I sighed and looked around to make sure we were alone. I'm bored. I mean, the others have spent their entire lives growing up here. It's home. But for me, I stopped there, unsure of how to exactly phrase my mounting frustration. It is just a place. Nothing more. Indeed, it probably feels like a prison. She finished for me and laughed at my surprise, shock at her so easily hitting the nail on the head. I am much like you in that regard. Oh, I was raised here from before I can remember, but I always felt a pull to leave. To explore the galaxy. Many Jedi are the same, but most still regard the temple as home, but to me, it is nothing but a place now. She paused and now it was her turn to glance around before leaning closer. I should not probably say this, but I do not like this planet. It feels like a world basking in decay and deceit. That feeling has only grown stronger over my time away from here, and even now, in this great temple, that feeling of decline is clear to me. Have you spoken to others about this? I asked, genuinely curious as to if she could feel the corruption of the Sith and the plans that were coming to fruition, and if she'd informed anyone of her sensations. No, I have not mentioned it to anyone here. Indeed, I am unsure as to why I even mentioned it to you. She paused and stared into my eyes, tilting her head in the process. You are far older than you appear, and something about you guided the Force to return me here. Well, I am technically 3,500 years old, I replied, hoping to deflect her attention as a tingle went up my spine. She smiled at the bad humor. Yes, while your legal age is far older than anyone else, that is not what I meant. She leaned forward and her hands lifted my head gently. Your body young, yet your inner energy, the part of you that is connected to the Force feels older. Her hands left my cheeks, yet I could still feel their touch, and she sat back. Jatiakara. She said that word once more and smiled at me as her head tilted to the side. The Force has marked you, of that I am certain. And I believe you already know this. I opened my mouth to deny her statement but paused. She was right in that I was here with a purpose, but just not one of the Force's making. No, just my own choice and the power of someone, thing far beyond the Force. So, I decided to play on it to probe in my own way. I have heard others hint at something similar. A prophecy about a chosen one. I didn't hide my annoyance at them thinking I could be their savior as I left that prophecy dangling. Faye laughed even as her brow rose. Yes, I imagine many would think that way. The child of the prodigal knight, sent across time and space, having killed a pair of Sith without any formal training. How could the masses not believe you were a gift from the Force? I only killed one Sith, and that was blind luck. I felt the need to correct that point. And yet that is what no less than 5 masters told me you had done, including one rather frustrated member of the council. She chuckled softly and shook her head. People always look for a cause, an ideal, a champion. They are willing to follow without truly understanding, and that often leads to more problems than it solves. Before I could ask what just she was on about, she stood. Forgive me, but I have taken up too much of my time and have an appointment with Master Yoda. Any time spent with one so wise and beautiful is well spent, I replied, though I instantly wondered why I had just attempted to flirt with her. Her musical laughter filled the air. Such a charmer. Already I fear for my fellow females when you reach your majority. She continued to laugh as she turned and walked away, and while I shouldn't have, I watched her go. She stopped just as she was about to disappear from my view, and my gaze moved upwards to meet hers. While I couldn't hear her, I could see her laugh a little as our eyes met, and I felt the heat return to my cheek. Damn it, I'm meant to only be 8. I need to act like it or others might suspect something is off about me. Faye shook her head even as she smiled and resumed walking, leaving my field of vision. The moment she did, I remembered the cleansing the temple quest and felt the urge to smash my head against the table. I should have said something to her about it, maybe hinted that I felt something off below the main temple and see if I could persuade her to take me on a trip downwards. I will have to remember to mention it to her the next time we talk, I muttered, though I didn't know when that would be. Today was the first time since meeting Faye that I had spoken to her, and one of the 4 months for me to select my trainer had already passed. Faye was the only one of the 4 Jedi Masters who I hadn't talked with until today, though my only words with Dooku were regarding my lightsaber training. Sifo Dyas and Lon both actively sought me out for conversation. Truthfully, Lon's continual need to ask me a question first during flight classes training was annoying everyone in Dragon Clan and had quickly soured me on choosing the only Jedi confirmed to be leaving the temple that might become my trainer. Ellipsis. Watch your footwork, Funt, I stated as I watched the Celestin duel Ayla. He didn't reply but slid his rear foot back a touch. Good. Now relax and just guide Ayla's attacks away from you. I observed as Ayla came at Funt using her preferred Ataru, while Funt tried to use the basics of Makashi. He, like a few others in Dragon Clan, had come to me about a week after the initiate trials had ended and asked for help learning the basics of the form. I had suggested they go to Dooku for instruction, but strangely none of them found my idea appealing. So here I was, 2 months after the trials, guiding the members of Dragon Clan through the basics of the dueling form. You're really good at teaching, said Sarah from my right side. Yeah, much nicer than Master Dooku, agreed Lon Boglid, a younger Duros member of the clan who was standing on my left. I actually enjoy these sessions. That's good, but remember not to state such a thing within range of Dooku, I replied to Lon, my eyes still watching the duel. It was a very slow affair as I had made sure that whoever the aggressor was, usually Lan, Sarah, or Ayla, wouldn't directly use the force while attacking and that they kept their movements slow. Everyone was a little confused as to why I had them do so since they hadn't done slow katas or spars since they were younglings. I had reminded them that Makashi was a form that none of the clan, save myself, had spent any real-time learning, so if a spar was conducted at regular speeds, they would instinctively fall back to their preferred form. Pause, I said loud enough for Funt and Ayla to hear me. Both stopped their motions as I stepped towards them. Funt, slowly go back to where you blocked her last strike. The pair reversed their actions until Ayla's blade was halfway through an aggressive arc. Stop there. Funt, when Ayla's blade came down, you raised yours fully to block it. Why? Funt blinked once, then shrugged. Why shouldn't I? I stopped her attack. His tone was calm, though there was a hint of annoyance which I suspected was because, of all the members of the clan, he was struggling the most with Makashi. I reached forward and placed my hands on his. You did, yes, but if you had done this, I looked at Ayla and she resumed her attack, though even slower than when they were sparring. As she did so, I tilted Funt's blade so that Ayla's attack would be guided away into one side of Funt's body while exposing Ayla's midsection. Then you would have been able to strike at her and gain the advantage. I finished as I released my grip. Remember, Makashi isn't about simply defending yourself, but about fluid motion, balance and precise strikes. Guide your opponent where you want them to go. Make them overcommit to their actions while you stay balanced. Funt nodded, and I stepped back from them. Resume. I watched as they continued from the new position even as I noted a skill level up in my notice box. With a subtle flick of my wrist, I opened it. Skill leveled up. Teaching novice. I had gotten this skill when I started these sessions. Each level granted a small boost in the ease with which my students learned from me. Well done. I didn't think anyone could get through his dewflaps and teach him so easily, said Durid quietly enough that the combatants didn't hear, with his amusement clear to hear. You're going to make an excellent instructor one day. He may one day be, but he is not one yet. I spun around at the familiar adult voice, my hand instantly reaching for where my lightsaber would be, if I was carrying one, and saw Masters Dooku and Dralig standing behind us. Dralig was relaxed, his eyes on Funt and Ayla, but Dooku's were locked onto mine the moment they met. What is going on here? He asked sharply, and I caught sight of Durid and the others quickly and quietly moving away from me to avoid being in Dooku's glares. Traitors. Sir, after the trials, a few members approached me for pointers on Makashi. Soon others did as well, and so I arranged an introductory session to the basics, in which I feel I have sufficient proficiency that I could pass them on. I replied calmly. Dooku's eyes narrowed and he glanced at the rest of the clan before returning his gaze to me. And why did you not ask Master Drolig or me to conduct these sessions? I glanced at the rest of the clan and noticed a few with pleading looks to not throw them under a bus. I felt I could handle the very basics of the form and did not wish to bother you or Master Drolig with something that may not have resulted in any of my clanmates choosing to take further studies in Makashi. If that occurred, it would have resulted in a waste of your time. I spotted Drolig nod once at my reason, but my focus was on Dooku. If I handled this well, it might help ingrain me with him more. More learners of the form he considered the true form might help persuade him that some Jedi were worth saving. Your reasons are valid, he said slowly, and I felt the corners of my lips twitch in triumph. However, neither Master Drolig nor I have stated you are proficient enough to teach even the most basic velocities of Makashi. With that, the smirk that had been developing fell away. Perhaps you should test him then, Drolig said, a smirk on his face as he looked at me. From what I saw in the trials, and in the regular sessions, he is competent enough to be tested on the form. He is too young. Nonsense. Unlike a few of the other forms, Makashi does not count strength as a major factor. You know this better than most, Drolig countered Dooku's argument. Besides, I am sure we both agree that more students of Makashi would be a good thing. Dooku's eyes narrowed further as he turned back to me. Perhaps you are correct. Come, initiate. He pivoted, his robes billowing out and forcing me to take a step back to avoid being struck by them, before marching away. You should do as he says, Drolig said with a rueful shake of his head. Actually, I think you should all come. It will allow you to view a pure Makashi duel, which will help you determine if you wish to commit to the form or not. Yes, Master, said Durid. We all followed the Jedi Battlemaster to the main sparring hall. Dooku was waiting in the middle of the smaller sparring circles and tossed me a training lightsaber as we approached. During this exercise, you may only use Makashi. The usage of velocities from other forms will result in your failure. If you can survive 5 minutes without sustaining 3 glancing strikes or 1 killing blow, it will be accepted that you understand the basics of Makashi well enough to carry out simple training sessions for your clanmates. However, if you fail, not only will I forbid you from holding your training sessions, but you will be forced to spend an hour each day under my tutelage until I am satisfied with your proficiency with Makashi. Do you accept these terms? Dooku asked as he ignited his lightsaber. Seeing it blue instead of red was still a little strange for me, and swished it a few times in the gap between us. Quest alert. Duel of Contention Challenge Quest. Prove your basic competence with Form 2 rating. See objective. Survive 5 minutes in a duel with a Makashi master without suffering 3 tags. Bonus. Rewards. Increased reputation with all Jedi. Heavily increased reputation with Master Dooku. Permission to hold elementary training sessions in Makashi for other initiates. 500 EXP failure. 0 to 300 EXP based on how long you survive. 1 hour daily tutoring with Master Dooku for 2 months. Loss of reputation with all Jedi. Accept. Yes, no. Note. Challenge quests are quests directed at you by another to prove yourself. This can be for a specific skill, a title, a competition, or for other reasons. These quests carry lower express rewards than regular quests, though they often grant reputation boosts with large groups or offer different rewards for competitions. Challenge quests cannot be denied without incurring an automatic failure. Son of A, I either accept it and probably get an ass kicking or reject it and fail. That's just, actually, it makes sense, I guess. Especially, as this whole power is unbalanced in my favor, to begin with. Yes, sir, I understand and accept, I said out loud as I ignited my blade and stepped into the circle. I knew from training that I could only keep on precognition and bullet time together for around 4 minutes, and as soon as they auto-engaged, I planned to turn off precognition. While both would be useful, a faster reaction time would grant me the best benefit during this spar, and I could always turn precognition back on if I started to struggle, provided I had the time or FP to do so. Dooku gave me a fractional nod of his head. Master Drolig, on your word. We both raised our blades in salute before swinging them downwards. Begin. Dooku stepped forward and probed my defenses with a flurry of short, sharp slashes. None of them were difficult to avoid or parry, and after the initial attack, Dooku stepped back and gave me a very fractional nod. Hopefully, it meant he was satisfied with my defense. Before I could consider it though, he came at me again, far faster than before. Thanks to bullet time, I was able to keep up with his thrusts, slashes, and probes, though I quickly could tell that he was still taking it easy on me, even as I began to struggle with the constant storm of movement. Eventually, his constant attacks exposed my blade arm and he clipped it, earning a point in the duel and costing me a few dozen HPs. Your defense is sound, though you lack the strength and reach that will come with age, he said as he stepped backwards, not taking further advantage of the hole he had created in my defense. Now then, let us see how well you can attack. I nodded in acceptance of the command and stepped forward to probe his defenses, even if I knew the odds of me breaking through and scoring a hit were minimal at best. I was quickly proven right. Nothing I did exposed an opening in his stance for me to exploit, even as I activated force speed in the hope that a faster attack would help. I wasn't sure how long I attacked for, since I was only concentrating on him and not the small countdown in the upper left of my vision, but suddenly I spotted a gap that seemed to expose his left thigh. I moved my blade to exploit the gap, only to stop as and ignore it. The moment I did so, Dooku parried my latest jab and tapped his blade against my forearm before stepping backwards. "Why did you not take the opening?" he asked as we reset our stances. "The chances of me succeeding in breaking through your defenses are slim, and while the gap was only there for a moment, it was too obvious and large to be anything but a trap." His lips twitched even as we saluted each other once more. "Good." He said nothing else before he came at me far faster than before, and I was instantly on the defensive, taking one step back. That step was followed by others, and I knew that if I did not do something soon, I would be forced from the ring and lose the spar. In desperation, I ignored an attack that was heading from my left side and pivoted away, dropping my lightsaber from my right hand to my left, and frantically jabbed the blade out in blind hope that it would block an attack I knew was coming. As I ended my pivot, my eyes bugged out a touch as the tip of his blade was now right between my eyes with my weapon in no position to help. "I yield," I said calmly, knowing the fight was over, and Dooku pulled his lightsaber backwards and extinguished it even as he clipped it to his belt. "Your attacks are slow and predictable yet controlled. Perhaps you do understand more than just the basics of Makashi," he spoke slowly with no audio or visual clue if he was impressed or disappointed in how I had done, even as he turned and looked away from me. Time: 7 minutes, 18 seconds. Master Dralig stated, and my head whipped around to see the Battlemaster standing there with a large smile on his face, and that there were more than just the members of Dragon Clan watching us. "I know you stated he only needed to survive 5 minutes, but I felt the other initiates would benefit from seeing Makashi in action from one of their own." "Indeed." Dooku turned back to me. "Your execution is commendable for one so young. You may continue instructing your clanmates in the basics of Makashi, but I reserve the right to test them at a time and place of my choosing." "Yes, sir," I answered as I tried, and failed, to stop a grin from creeping onto my face. Dooku gave me a short nod before walking away, which allowed the rest of Dragon Clan to rush into the ring. "That was awesome," shouted JYL as she bounced over with the others. "You made Dooku smile, and you landed a strike on him," Sia Lan added, giving me an unexpected smile with a sideways tilt of her head. "What? When?" I asked, since I had no memory of doing so. "When you pivoted out of position," Durid explained. "You managed to tag his forearm without looking. Sure, you lost, but we all knew that was coming." "Not all of us," Ayla stated with a smirk as she glanced at Sarah, who avoided my gaze when I turned to her. "That was pure luck. I only extended my lightsaber in the vain hope it would force him back when I lost sight of him," I explained to the clan as I looked at each of them in turn. "Master Dooku is many levels beyond where I am and has decades of experience with using Makashi, probably in real combat." "Yeah, but that was still awesome. The way the two of you seemed to flow without really moving was incredible. I want to learn Makashi," JYL stated with firmness in her voice. Up until now, JYL hadn't shown any interest in Makashi, though she came to the sessions, preferring Sorazu. I smiled at the younger girl. "That's fine, but remember that every form has its own advantages and drawbacks." I know. But Makashi looks graceful, fluid." JYL smiled as she looked skyward. "It feels right." I had nothing to add to that and so just nodded at her. "Well, you'll have to try Makashi next session. We have flight training with Night Lawn in 10 minutes, and I doubt Cameron being tested by Master Dooku is a valid excuse as to why we are all late," Durid stated after a glance at his datapad. As we moved off to our class, I slid to the back of the group and accessed my interface. Quest completed. Duel of Contention Challenge Quest Objectives. Survive 5 minutes in a duel with a Makashi Master without suffering 3 tags. Yes. Score a hit on the Jedi Master. Yes. Rewards. Increased reputation with all Jedi. Heavily increased reputation with Master Dooku. Permission to hold elementary training sessions in Makashi for other initiates. 500 EXP 300 EXP. Nice, though I wish I knew what my reputation was with everyone. Currently, all that was displayed on my reputation page were 2 lists, Jedi and others, with some details about the various beings I had met. I wouldn't find out how I stood with others until I turned 11, and the system upgraded. Whatever that meant. Still, this should boost my standing in the order and hopefully increase my chances of preventing Dooku's fall. I waved away the message and caught up with the rest of the clan to continue the day. Quest failed. Miners Run Challenge Quest Objectives. Complete the challenge in the quickest time. Casualties will result in time penalties. 3rd. Destroy a target 5 EXP target 20 rewards. 100 EXP 100 EXP. At least I got express for my kills, and not coming last, I thought as I waved the quest failure notice. It referred to an instant quest created during what was hopefully my last flight training class when Night Lawn randomly split Dragon Clan into 4 teams and gave us a challenge. If my team had won, I'd have earned a chance to fly a real ship, but given that my teammates were the 2 youngest members of the clan to be allowed to take flight training, and that I'd already flown on a starship, I wasn't too concerned about failing my first quest. I was just glad we hadn't finished last, as that would have resulted in a loss of reputation with Dragon Clan. The only quests that I was worried about failing were the Changing Fates quests, as if I failed them, they would make things worse for both me and the Jedi, though I was more concerned with my own fate at the Orders, and the 2 quests that would lock my skills at a certain level for years. Congratulations to Blue Team, Lon said with a smile that exposed fearsome-looking fangs as Ayla, Sarah and JYL bounced around in enjoyment at winning. Also well done to Cameron, who scored the highest number of kills during the competition. I acknowledged him with a slight nod but had no other reaction to his statement. Since my teammates had been the youngest, and least experienced, on the simulators, during our attempt at the mission, I'd acted as bait for the defenders, and drawn a majority away from the target. That I'd managed to kill so many was due as much to the program's low level as it was to my skills at flying in combat. Knight Lon, may I enter? We all turned to see Master Gun D standing in the doorway. Of course, Master D, Lon replied with a partial bow. We have just finished class for the day. Yes, I was watching on the monitor outside, D stated as he took a few steps into the room. Blue Team worked extremely well as a unit. I glanced to my left and noted the 3 girls all sitting up straighter at the praise. However, that is not why I am here. Initiates Bikies and Sean, the Council of First Knowledge wishes to speak with you both. Come with me. Durid and I stood and followed the Nikto Jedi Master through the halls of the temple. Since tomorrow was the first day of New Year's week, I knew that it was time for me to make my choice regarding which Jedi would be my master, and I was hoping I could convince the council of my choice. I could only hope that Durid had also been chosen as a Padawan if he was also being summoned by the council. I didn't think he was being reassigned to one of the corps, but either way, I planned to try to keep in contact with him as loyal allies were going to be needed in the coming decades. The walk was done in silence, save for Master D greeting other Jedi as we passed them. Many of those Jedi stared intently at me as we passed. I was not enjoying the fact many saw me as their chosen one but figured I could put up with it since I was soon to leave the temple and it would hopefully mean some of them would not try to fill Anakin's head with the bull when he joined. However, I had no intention of staying in the temple to be trained as I needed to begin prepping for the war to come. I had had a revelation about how to begin to earn credits, but that needed outside access, like almost every other thing I needed to do before the war came. Initiate Sean, please wait here. Initiate Bikies, enter with me. D stated as we arrived in the antechamber for the Council of First Knowledge. I gave Durid a smile and a nod in support before he followed the Jedi Master into the chambers. As the doors closed, I sat down on an empty bench and considered how I was going to get what I wanted, though how to go about it was still uncertain as I worried the Force would be a factor in this argument, yet I still didn't know how it saw me. The one thing I had taken from that brief explanation about the Force was that it saw both the Jedi and Sith as unbalanced, which suggested to me that if I could find a new, better way, the Force may just decide to help me. Then again, it could just as easily decide my new way was worse, and subtly act against me and those who stood with me. Perplexing did not even begin to describe the Force, and the less said about TPTB, the better. Good, you're learning. We are so far beyond you, that you cannot understand our ways. But know that whatever you choose to do with this new life, we accept. Live your life, or don't. Be a Jedi, a Sith or something else. Engage in what you call virtues or vices. All of this is your choice. Sometimes I don't know if TPTB are simply uncaring or do things like give me these powers to amuse themselves. They act like both the prophets and the Q at the same time. I thought, using the 2 Star Trek omnipotent races as examples. Examples that should not be compatible, yet both worked, at least partially, to help me gain an understanding of TPTB. Even if it might be a flawed one. Best not to dwell on things I cannot control or understand for too long, I muttered as the message from TPTB vanished. List quests. Quests. These are the story chains that will help push and shape your new life. Quests come in various forms, from repeatable simple ones to long, multi-part campaigns. Most of your activities will be set up as quests, however, you are free to decline most quests. You can also create your own quests if you are willing to push yourself beyond what would be considered easy, safe. All quests are rated from F to S **** for difficulty, with anything rated B or overrunning the risk of bodily harm, if not death. Current quests, with rankings, are Tremors of the Ancient Sith Empire S ****, Forge Your Own Path N.A. Cleanse the Temple B. Changing Fate Dooku A. You Can't Hurt Me User-Defined B. Stones of Muntur S. Wipe That Grin Off Her Face User-Defined D. Changing Fate Anakin S ***, Just Don't Get Caught User-Defined C. Changing Fate Ki-Gon B. Changing Fate Sifo DSB Trainee Space Ranger User-Defined C. Trainee Ace User-Defined C. Competent Duelist User-Defined C. Competent Swordsman User-Defined C. Trainee Defender User-Defined C. 2 or better than 1 B. For more details, on a quest, tap it or say, list quest, followed by the quest required. Competent Swordsman and Trainee Defender referred to quests for Shicho and Sorazu that I had taken when I'd examined my skills after being challenged to prove my competency with Makashi and found I had passed Professional 1. I had decided to try to improve those 2 forms during my nightly training cycles. Only needing to sleep once every 30 days thanks to the force power serenity was just ridiculous, but I had to learn to exploit these seeming flaws in my special powers. If I had truly understood how the interface worked before I'd created my new life, I have done things differently during the creation of my new life, like taking eidetic memory instead of photographic memory. Though I would correct that mistake the first chance I got. Still, there was no point in dwelling on things I couldn't change. List quest, 2 or better than 1. 2 or better than 1 user defined, gain 2 Jedi Masters as your formal trainers. Rating, be objective, convince the Council of First Knowledge that both Faye and Dooku should become your masters. Rewards, 2000 express plus 25 ranks in skill persuasion failure. Loss of reputation with whoever doesn't become your trainer and lack of access to them for 5 years. The quest had been generated once I'd made up my mind last week to try to gain both Dooku and Faye as my trainers. The risk of failure was big, especially if I lost access to Dooku, as that would probably remove the reputation gain that I'd made during the Duel of Contention quest and would greatly increase the chances of me failing the Changing Fate Dooku quest. Still, I was going to try anyway to get both as trainers, and even before the quest had been generated, I'd expected to lose access to whoever wasn't assigned as my master if I failed to convince the Council of my wish, so overall, the risks were acceptable. Initiate Sean, the Council is ready to speak with you. I stood at Master D's statement and spared a glance for Durid. He was smiling happily, so I hoped that meant he had been assigned a master that he was happy with. As Master D turned back towards the chamber, I quickly activated player's mind and the force powers of Enhanced Stat and Enhanced Skill. The boots weren't much, 1 stat point to Cha and a handful of skill levels for persuasion, but any help was welcomed for what I was about to attempt. Entering the chambers, I saw all 5 members of the First Knowledge Council present. The seer, Neela's, gave me a small smile as she turned to face me. Greetings once more, young one. Please step forward, Astal Vilbum said with a smile on his heavily wrinkled face. Do you understand why we have called you here today? He asked as I stepped into the center of the chamber. Yes, sir. And I have reached a decision, but I wish to explain it to you, I replied as I took a breath. I already suspect your choice, young one, and my vote you have, if that is indeed the case, Neela said, the smile growing a touch. I nodded at her, even if deep down I was worried that the Force was letting Seers know what I planned before I did anything. I am the master of my fate, not the Force. Thank you. When I was last called to face this council, I was given 4 choices for whom to take as my Jedi trainer. Knight Lon is engaging, friendly and eager. Master Sifo Dyas is a diplomat of renown, and who also appears patient and willing to listen to the concerns of younglings. Master Dooku is the Jedi Order's true master of Makashi, and a firm but fair trainer who has little to no patience for excuses. Master Faye is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. She is a very powerful force wielder, yet she reminds me of my first schoolteacher in how aloof she is. That is a fair assessment of the 4 Jedi who we feel would be best to become your master, Adi Gallia said with a slight upturn of her lips. And I am impressed you have gotten such accurate impressions of them at your tender age. But what exactly does this have to do with your choice? I feel that I need to explain my choice, and before I do that, I wish to make it clear that I hold no ill will towards those I have not chosen. That earned me nods or smiles from the entire council. Truthfully, my choice is unusual, I suspect, but it is what I feel the Force is guiding me to. Okay, not totally true, but I knew I had to play every card I could to make this work. And what is your choice? Master PL asked, his ears twitching as he leaned forward. With this council's permission, I would accept either Master Dooku or Master Faye as my Jedi Master, however, I wish to learn equally from both. The masters looked at each other, their smiles faltering, save Neela's, whose own smile grew as she gave me a nod, meaning this was the choice she had seen in a vision. I again ignored, for now, the fact the Force was able to predict my actions. That was an issue to think about at a later date. That is, an unusual request, Astal said slowly after a moment of silence that I suspected the council had used to talk with each other telepathically. Do you have reasons for making this request? I smiled a touch at not having my request rejected out of hand. Now to explain my reasons and see where things went. Master Dooku is the undisputed master of Makashi, the form I find myself drawn to, and while he can appear to be uninterested in training, I find his strict and concise lessons rewarding. Okay, I plan to learn all 7 forms to at least master levels, but there was no need to state that here and now. Master Faye is something undefinable. At least to me, there is an energy, a pull, that I cannot deny the feeling. I would not assume to suggest it was the will of the Force, yet I cannot deny that the few times I have spent with her have been more enlightening than anything else I have learned with these walls. I knew that if I had said some of that after I had hit puberty, it could have had a hidden context, but since I was not yet affected by those physical and psychological changes, I hope the council would not worry about that issue. That Faye was essentially a space elf had nothing to do with my opinion, though it did make me curious about her species. Your reasons are sound, yet no Padawan is assigned 2 masters. Why should we make an exception for you? Do you feel you are special? Master D asked with a frown that pulled the horns on his head closer, giving him a slightly demonic look. I am no more or less special than anyone, I replied slowly, having expected this line of questioning. My, admittedly limited understanding of the Jedi Code states that we are to forego attachments, yet it is common practice to assign an initiate to a knight or master, thus creating a bond of attachment from a child that has never known a true parental figure. From my thinking, I am led to believe that this is allowed as it maintains loyalty to the order above all else. I noticed that Gallia was nodding while both Neelas and Astal were smiling as I spoke. I, on the other hand, have already had a parental figure. I have suffered loss, and know that death is not the end, but merely a natural part of the circle of life. As my grandfather used to say, we are born of the stars and return to the stars upon our deaths. Thus, I am far less likely to accept any single Jedi as a parental figure going forward. Well spoken, yet I have yet to hear a reason for granting you the right to have two masters, PL stated, a crease in his brow making his ears droop in a way that would have made me chuckle at the silliness, cuteness of it if not for players' mind being engaged. I already formed bonds to others before the Order, and while yes, those people are gone, the bonds to them, and what they taught me still exist in here. I tapped my head. I respect what the Order is, I wish to learn more and help protect those that cannot protect themselves, yet that loyalty to the Order that all others my age have, I do not. And I do not think time spent with a single master to guide me is enough to help me fully integrate with this ideal or the Force. Some of that was true, some wasn't, but it was all something that I hoped the Council wanted or needed to hear. Your reasons are valid, and you have shown why we generally avoid taking in older younglings, yet you have done nothing to truly convince us of your wish, D stated, earning him nods of agreement from Gallia and PL. I shrugged. If that is so, then you can assign me to one of the masters I prefer, or one of the others I do not. That is your choice, but all our actions now create ripples in life, within the Force itself, and actions that are taken without understanding are often the wrong actions to take. I paused and took a breath. 4 months ago, you gave me a choice, today I have given my preference. Now all I can do is wait for your decision. Astal smiled that wrinkly smile of his and chuckled. Very true. You are wiser than most your age and speak with an intelligence far beyond your years. He looked at the other members of the council. We will consider your request for a few days, but before we allow you to leave this chamber. He trailed off and I watched as Master D left the chamber, only to return with Durid a moment later, the smile from before still present, though more under control. Initiates Bikes and Sean, you have been chosen and accepted as Padawans of the Jedi Order. Now it is time for you to construct your own lightsaber. Report to the hangar in this spire no later than 1900 for the gathering. Yes, Master, Durid said with a bow that I copied, and we left the chamber. Even if no formal dismissal was given, it was clear that we should leave. Yahoo! Durid shouted as soon as we entered the elevator. Who were you assigned as your master? He asked with a grin. The council has given me a choice and they are debating who would be the best for my further training, I replied. I wasn't intentionally being vague, but I didn't want to deal with others thinking I might have two Jedi Masters before the council made their final decision. What about you? Master Sifo Dyas, he replied, and I felt my brow rise. It was a good thing I had decided a while ago against taking him as a trainer or things would be very awkward. I could only assume that Sifo Dyas had realized I was not interested in becoming his Padawan and turned his attention to others in Dragon Clan. Congratulations are in order then. This is my stop. I will see you in the hangar, I said as we reached the hall leading to my quarters. You don't want to talk with the others? He asked as his smile faltered a touch. No, I am concerned that some of them may resent me being taken before them, so I would ask that you not mention anything about why I was called to the council to them. Durid nodded before he replied. Right, I hadn't considered that. Well, see you later, Padawan. The doors closed on his smiling face, which exposed his sharp-looking teeth. I walked quietly to my quarters and began to pack the few things that I would need for this gathering, even as I did mental somersaults at finally getting to make my own lightsaber. Ellipsis ellipsis ellipsis. Crystal Stars 2 chapter by USSExplorer. I ignored the regular morning notice that my HP, FP and stamina had all been fully restored after having 8 hours or more of sleep and rolled out of the bed in the cabin I was sharing with Durid. We were currently aboard the Crucible, a Jedi training ship on our way to Ilum. Since I had to share a compartment, I decided it was safer to simply sleep normally for the few days this trip would take. As I stood and stretched, I saw a series of flashing notices in my log. Checking that Durid was still sleeping, I sat back down and opened them. Quest completed. Trainee Space Ranger objectives. Get piloting space to Adept, 1 by the new year. Yes. Get it to Adept, 25 no. Get it to Adept, 50 no. Rewards, 600 XP. Quest completed. Trainee Ace objectives. Get piloting atmosphere to Adept, 1 by the new year. Yes. Get it to Adept, 25 no. Get it to Adept, 50 no. Rewards, 600 XP. Quest completed. Competent Duelist objectives. Get Makashi to Professional, 1 by the new year. Yes. Get it to Professional, 25 yes. Get it to Professional, 50 yes. Rewards, 800 XP 300 XP 500 XP. Quest completed. Competent Swordsman objectives. Get Shicho to Professional, 1 by the new year. Yes. Get it to professional. 25, yes. Get it to professional. 50, yes. Rewards. 900 XP 400 XP 600x. Quest completed. Trainee Defender objectives. Get Sorazu to Adept, 1 by the new year. Yes. Get it to Adept. 25, no. Get it to Adept. 50, no. Rewards. 650 XP. Level up. Level. 910 FP, plus 500 PP, plus 2 STAM, plus 14 SP, plus 5 SKP, plus 32 PPP, plus 1 NIS. Another level up, mainly by exploiting these powers better with small, narrow-focused quests. The 2 extra lightsaber form quests granted a greater boost in Express as the timeframe was smaller. I was now sure I could set quests for shorter timeframes and generate more XP quicker for completing them. Though the knowledge that the bonuses for all these skill-focused quests were level 25 or 50 of the initial target, meant I could adapt my training to aim for them as well. I swiped away the notices and quietly spoke. List player powers. Player powers. These are powers and skills that are unique to the player. However, some of them are close to what many consider to be dark side force powers, so be careful when using them around light side force users. You gain 1 player power point every 5 levels to spend on new powers. Currently, you have the following player powers. Player's Mind ON off Player's Body Inventory Note. Currently, you have 2 PPPs. Do you wish to view available player powers? Yes, no. Yes, I whispered, glad that I'd turned off the info dump on the pages like this so that it just listed what I had or could take. If I wanted further details on a force power or perk, I just needed to ask the interface to list it. Available player powers. Silent Interface Enhanced Inventory Examine Enlarge Shrink Color Shift. Glamours. You may view details about new powers by tapping on them and reading the descriptions. To purchase a power, state, purchase power, followed by the power you wish to take. I tapped each in turn and read the descriptions. Silent Interface enabled me to give commands to my power without having to vocalize them. That was going to be huge as currently, I had to whisper commands like I was doing now if I wasn't alone. Enhanced Inventory increased the volume of each slot in my inventory to a meter squared while doubling the number of an object that could be stored in each slot. That would be useful if I had much in there, but all I had were 2 lightsabers, a Sith holocron, a stim pack, an ancient blaster rifle, a 4,000-year-old vibroblade and a spare power cell for the rifle. The only reason I was still holding onto the rifle and vibroblade is they might still be useful in the current galaxy. And if not, I could sell them off as relics. Maybe. Examine instantly sounded overpowered. By simply touching an object or person, I could, as the power evolved, gain information about it, them such as what it was and did, how much damage it could take, its value and what it was made of. I got some of that from examining an item in my inventory, but the extra details would expand on what inventory provided. Enlarged Shrink allowed me to increase or decrease the size of any non-organic object by 1% per day. This power had the potential to be applied to organic matter like food and living beings as it leveled up and increased how often I could apply it each day. That could, in theory, allow me to take a kilo of precious metal and, over time, end up with several kilos. Talk about an economically unbalanced power. Color Shift allowed me to change the color of any inorganic object with the size I could change dependent on the power's level. It sounded semi-useful, but not very powerful. Glamours allowed me to change various parts of my facial appearance, hair, eyes, skin in color and or shape for short times, and at the highest levels could even allow me to change my appearance to another humanoid race. This had the potential for creating multiple personas for hiding from people who were after me. Yet, I wondered if such a thing wasn't possible with the Force, though whether that would work on droids was something I was unsure of. Of the 5, Silent Interface was a certainty to take, while Examine and Enlarge Shrink had the next highest possible usage, with Glamours and Enhanced Inventory also being useful. Color Shift sounded a little pointless, but I wasn't stupid enough to just dismiss it out of hand. Morning Cam. I turned from the choices, waving them away with a casual swish, and looked over at Durid with a small frown at him, preventing me from choosing new powers and for him using the nickname that Sarah had come up with for me. You know I hate that. Yeah, but it's so much easier than saying your full name, he replied with a smile as he stood and stretched. Have you cleaned yet? Nah, you go ahead. Okay, but I'll be quick. It's going to be so cool learning about how to build and maintain a lightsaber. You and I have very different ideas about what is cool, I muttered as he walked to the smaller refresher in our quarters. The trip to Ilum was projected to take 2 days. During that time, Padawan Boltar Swan, who was escorting us and the 6 others who were taken as Padawans to Ilum, would be teaching us all about lightsabers, including their history and meaning. It sounded less than enjoyable, but like basic training for the army, it was something that had to be done, so I would get through it. No matter how boring I thought it was going to be. 4 days, and hours upon hours of tedious lessons on lightsaber usage and safety instructions. Seriously, who would use it for recreational activities? Later, we arrived at Ilum. Soon enough, I found myself standing just inside the entrance of the ice chamber of Ilum that I remembered from the Clone Wars cartoon. While the time had been boring, I had gained and leveled up 52 times a skill called Mechanics Lightsaber. This was a skill that covered building, maintaining, and enhancing a lightsaber. I assumed this meant that I needed to level it up if I wished to add extra crystals to a lightsaber like what could be done in KOTOR, but I wasn't certain as nothing in the lectures had covered the adding of extra crystals to a lightsaber. I suspected that, like a few other things I remembered from KOTOR, it had been discontinued, or outlawed, by the current Jedi Order. Since we'd spent the whole 4 days learning about lightsaber usage and safety, I'd just run Force Cloak, which I could now run continuously without my FP ever draining, constantly for the last few days and nights. This had taken it past Savon 50, which granted me a new Force power, Force Camouflage. While Force Cloak was more meant to add to my natural skill at stealth, Force Camouflage actively hid me from sight with the Force, though currently, it didn't hide me from droids or detection via IR, UV or similar methods. Even if the last few days had seemed wasted, new powers and skills were always welcome, so I considered it a fair trade. As I began to walk with the small group of other potential Padawans, I silently wondered what challenge I would have to face in this cave. He approaches. The voice came suddenly and unexpectedly, carried by the swirling snow. I glanced around, half expecting a few more Jedi to appear to monitor our progress. There was nothing. What do we do now? Durid asked the older initiates. I glanced at them, they seemed not to have heard anything at all. Summon the council. There it was again. The same voice, though I thought the undertones might be slightly different. Trust in the Force, replied the eldest, sadly for me John Savos from Katarn clan, confidently. Though for now, let's stick together for safety. I fought off an urge to roll my eyes at him saying to trust the Force, and followed the group further into the cave. Come to us, Master. We are waiting for you. How long do you think we have before the door freezes over? Asakan, an older human with white hair and eyes, asked. The council is in session, Master. I'd say a few hours at least, replied Gasti, a red-skinned Zabrak who had two forward-facing horns that gave her a demonic look. What is your desire, my master? We await your command, Grand Master. The voices were slowly becoming louder as we walked deeper into the caves until I had to stop and stare at the passage from which the voices were coming. Cam, what is it? Durid asked and the group stopped and looked at me. I can hear something, I muttered as I stared down the tunnel. Oh, the Great One hears something. Praise to the Force, John exclaimed, his hands coming to his cheeks. We should all bow to the Cho, Ark. He stopped as I used the TK to clamp his mouth shut. I suggest you hold your tongue, lest I do something more than just clamp your mouth shut, I warned. After 2 days of his condescending and belittling comments, I was fed up. Sure, I shouldn't just casually use the Force to shut him up, but I'd reached the end of my tether. He could go and bitch to the council once we returned if he wanted, but that would just prove he was nothing more than a sycophant. Not worth I shook my head to clear it. Where did that come from? I wondered as I released the grip I had on his jaw. There is something this way. I'm going. I didn't catch what anyone said as I walked away from the group and down the side tunnel. The walls began to close in, and the light began to dim, so I activated Force Sight. Fuck, I called out as my vision was flooded, my hands went to my knees and I turned off the power. I forgot the whole place was soaked in the Force and I stayed bent over blinking until my vision settled. That was stupid. Yes, it was. My head snapped up at hearing a voice that sounded both familiar and yet new, and I found myself staring at someone that reminded me of Von Shan. Yet as I examined the figure a few things stood out. First, and the biggest, was that the person wasn't a person, more of a semi-solid ghost. Not unlike a Force ghost, but this one was lacking the blue edge lighting and it was difficult to see through them. Though that might just be because I was standing in a darkened cave. The shape of their face wasn't Vonner's, though it was similar, and as I focused on the face, I noticed the eyes held a slight hint of green and the hair had flecks of light brown, whereas Vonner's hair and eyes had been dark brown. The jaw was squarer than Vonner's had been as well, and this figure was maybe a head taller than my grandfather. Who are you? I asked as I turned to lower my profile to the ghost. Who do you think I am? The ghost asked calmly. I frowned and examined the face even closer before it clicked. Me. Somehow, you are a much older version of me. Indeed, I am Master Cameron Shan, Grand Master of the Jedi Order. Ghost Me stated evenly as the area behind him came into focus and I saw others sitting around behind him. Obi-Wan, Ayla, an older woman who I suspected was Sarah, Faye, and others who I did not recognize but that felt familiar. The room was meant to be the High Council chambers, but everything in the room was white. Whether that was because of the vision, or something else, I did not know. Then why are you here? I asked cautiously. I am what you could become if you chose to be, the Jedi version of me stated in a tone that seemed devoid of emotion. Are you something sent by the Force to test me? I slowly asked as I examined this Jedi's face. There was no indication of how he was feeling or thinking. Indeed, the face seemed almost robotic in his mannerisms. We both are. I spun to face behind me and saw myself again. Yet this version was different from the first. This me was sitting on it could only be called a throne. The back reached high above him as he watched me condescendingly, his hand gripping a lightsaber hilt. Oh great, it's the angel devil routine, I muttered with a shake of my head. Boltar had told us that we'd face a challenge which we'd have to overcome, but that mine would be the whole Jedi-Sith dichotomy was disappointing, if not unexpected. The PTB had stated the Force wasn't sure how I fitted into its ideals of balance, so this kind of test was logical. Please tell me you aren't going to perch on my shoulder. Do not mock what you don't understand, boy, Sith me snarled as figures emerged from behind him. My jaw fell open as the same females that were with Jedi me sauntered around the throne. Ayla, Sarah, Faye, a red-skinned Togruta, a green-skinned Mirielon, and even Padme, moved around the throne, stroking the arms, legs and chest of Sith me as they did. Though what had me from making a retort was the fact that all were dressed in what could only be described as cosplay outfits. Adult cosplay outfits that in some cases wouldn't look out of place in a bad adult movie. The only part of the cosplay that looked strange was the collar around each of their necks, though it did take me a few moments to even spot those. Power grants you many things, boy. You will learn to enjoy them as you claim your power, Sith me stated as one of his hands moved down Faye's back before drifting out of my sight as he reached her ass. She gasped and Sith me smirked as he continued. With our power, we can mold the galaxy to our will, take and control what we want. Palpatine is powerful, but in the end, he can do nothing to stop us. He cannot stop you. I saw the muscles in the arm behind Faye clench, and Faye gasped loudly as they did. The Force is not something to be controlled. Jedi me countered evenly, drawing my attention slowly back to him. It is something to let guide us, to take our emotions. Our power lets us achieve this better than any other. We serve it better than any other can. Only we can guide the Jedi to achieve a true merging with the Force. Only we can submit to the Force as it guides the galaxy around us. He lies. Like all Jedi, he wants your servitude. Follow me. Embrace your power and take what you want. Sith only care for power. That power is all that drives them until they are nothing without it. This is all well and good, but do either of you have any cookies? I asked with a small smirk just to break up the back and forth the two elder versions of me had going, and it was too easy of an opportunity to make that joke. The Jedi are nothing more than bantha being led to the slaughter. Claim your power, break your chains and be free. Or die like the rest. Sith me stood and ignited two red lightsabers. We must serve the Force. If you will not serve, you must be removed. Jedi me stated neutrally as he ignited a double-bladed lightsaber, one blade blue, the other green. Okay then, I muttered as I stepped backwards and sent a concentrated blast of Force energy at both. They simmered as the blast struck and went through them, but what worried me was the rumble I felt from the cave as the blasts hit the walls. Well, that didn't work. Unchallenged aggression, the sign of a Sith, stated Jedi me with a calm, clear voice. Narrow-minded dogma, the sign of the Jedi. Sith me snarled as his face twisted in anger. But which are you? They asked together as they moved closer and raised their blades. Neither. I hope, I replied as I scooted backwards and mentally opened my inventory just in case. Boy, was I glad I took that player power. After all, I am only 8. Okay, I'll be 9 soon, I think. But honestly, to me, both of you are wrong. No, we must dominate the Force. No, we must submit to the Force. The two ghosts said at the same time as they continued to approach. If you are not with us, you are against us. These words they spoke in perfect tandem. Wonderful, I muttered as they came closer, the light from their lightsabers beginning to merge. I reached into my inventory, pulled out Hachu's lightsaber and ignited the blade. I brought it up, barely managing to block Jedi me's attack before one of Sith me's lightsabers struck my hilt, shattering it and making me stumble away. I reached back into my inventory and pulled out the other lightsaber. I pivoted and parried Sith me's attacks a few times before the hilt was struck by Jedi me stabbing it with his blade. For fuck's sake, I grumbled as I dove over the double-bladed lightsaber and rolled down the passage. I turned as I came to a stop and saw the two were now walking side by side toward me. Can't we just talk about this? I asked as I mentally tried to come up with a way to escape this without losing any part of my body. I had thought they were just ghosts or figments of my imagination, but the two destroyed lightsaber hilts proved that theory wrong, and I was unwilling to risk any of their blades hitting me. If you will not accept the way of the Jedi, you must be removed. If you will not accept the way of the Sith, you must die. They spoke simultaneously. As Sith me raised his blades to attack, an insane idea came to me and I used the Force to push his blades towards Jedi me. Jedi me instinctively defended himself and turned to face Sith me. I watched as the two future me's, future eyes, began to fight against each other. Sith me lost a hand and blade even as he struck part of Jedi me's hilt. They spun away from each other and raised their remaining blades to attack. The battle was quick as Jedi me parried an attack and sliced Sith me in the chest, though Sith me had reacted to the parry to stab his blade through Jedi me's heart. As both fell to their knees, they turned to me. A path must be chosen, they said with one voice. Which will you take? That was something, I muttered as the two figures fade away, yet my eyes narrowed. Where they had been, I saw light coming from the floor. Kneeling cautiously where Jedi me had been, I found a small crystal, though it seemed almost too small to be used in a lightsaber. Like it was incomplete. Curious, I used one of my new player powers, examine, on it. Ilum Adegan Crystal Miniature, a Kyber crystal from the caves on the planet Ilum. This crystal, while capable of being used as a focus for the Force, is too small to be used in a lightsaber. That wasn't much information, which I had expected as Examine currently didn't tell me much about an object or person, but it did confirm that the crystal was too small for what I needed. I turned as I saw another light from where Sith Me had fallen and discovered another smaller than expected crystal. After using Examine on that one and discovering that it too was too small to be used, I placed the two crystals in a single hand and rolled them around until the two came to rest together, seemingly forming a new, larger crystal, and a gentle chime sounded from them. Unexpected, I muttered to myself as I pocketed the two half crystals and moved to the remains of the two lightsabers I had used. Both were destroyed, though as I examined the combined remains of them, I felt I could salvage enough from their parts to create a single hilt, and critically, the two lightsaber crystals were intact. Each of these crystals, while still small, was larger than either of the two I had just pocketed. I pulled the mini crystals from my pocket and compared them in one hand with what I felt were normal-sized crystals in the other. Combined, the two mini crystals were a touch big than the normal crystals, so I suspected I could use them together in a lightsaber. Though I was curious if using two crystals would influence the lightsaber blade generated. Realizing that I would need to talk with Boltar Swan or another Jedi about using the two mini crystals in a lightsaber, I placed them back in my pocket and slipped the remains of the two lightsabers into my inventory. I had every intention of creating another blade, not just to practice Jarkai once I could, but so that I had another blade available if I needed one and didn't want to use the hilt the Jedi knew about. I stood and turned to begin walking back towards the entrance of the cave. Fucking hell. I stumbled back and fell to a knee as I came eye to eye with another ghost, though this one was tinted blue as I'd expect for a Force ghost. This ghost again reminded me of Vonner Shan, yet the eyes were purple and his hair a darker brown. The facial structure was similar to Vonner's, yet the cheeks were more withdrawn, and this ghost had an air about him that spoke of power. Did I startle you? The ghost asked with a small smirk. What do you think? And who the fuck are you? I blurted out in reply, my anger building slightly at potentially having to deal with another Force-induced episode. The ghost chuckled and raised his hands, palms out. Relax, I am not here to attack you. Merely to talk. Before I joined with the Force, I was known as Revan. I felt my jaw fall a touch at that revelation. This Revan looked nothing like the one I had played as, yet the similarity between him and Vonner, and even myself a little, meant I knew he was telling the truth. Why are you here? I probed as Revan smirked at my reaction to his reveal. To talk, nothing more, said Revan in reply as he leaned back against the tunnel's wall. Though I am unsure of how to address you. Why? Revan's smirk fell. You are my descendant, yet you are not. Being one with the Force has let me see possible, probable futures. For the longest time, your destiny was to die when the Sith attacked, yet barely a week before you were meant to die, something happened. I frowned as he stated that without my intervention this, Cameron, would have died. So, what changed? I asked, trying to play ignorant. Revan tilted his head and gave me a small smile. You know well what happened. You are my great-grandson, yet you are also not. Something beyond the Force changed your fate and gave you unique powers that, while I have observed you using, I fail to comprehend. He glanced at my hands. Those two lightsabers that you can hide beyond sight of the Force are the clearest sign of your different status. Do you hate me for changing his fate? I asked slowly, hoping he would not, as I had no clue how to deal with an angry Force ghost, nor any idea of how to handle upsetting the Force itself. That was if the ghost and the Force were one and the same. I admit that a small part of me does. Yet the larger part knows that if you had not. He paused and shook his head. I am unsure of what word to use here. Replaced, merged, it doesn't really matter, he said, dismissing the matter with a wave of his hand. The larger part of me is grateful that my bloodline continues, even if this time grows darker and darker as the Sith grow stronger. Yet I sense you not only know about this thread but willingly chose to be here and now. I did, I replied with a small nod. I don't know if I can stop Sidious and those he's working with, but I mean to try. Revan smirked. To quote an old master of the High Council, do or do not, there is no try. I couldn't help myself and I laughed loudly. The current Grand Master has used that one. I managed to get out once I stopped laughing. Revan chuckled gently and shook his head. While the phrase remains popular, it holds regardless of era. Do not try, my boy. Do what needs to be done. Balance the Force. Is that what the Force desires? I queried as I moved around to find a more comfortable way to sit as I felt this conversation was going to continue for some time. Revan smiled in that almost condescending way that adults did with children. The Force is complicated. Even after millennia within it, I cannot say I understand it fully, yet if I had to say, that if it desired anything, not that I believe it is sentient in a way either of us could understand, it would desire balance. I frowned as a question that never truly left my mind bounced to the forefront. What does that mean though? I mean, I know the Sith do not bring balance, not once they fall so far as to need the Force almost like a glutton continually desires food yet is never full. Yet, I don't think the Jedi are much better. Revan chuckled once. Yes, your little dilemma just now proved that. He paused and stroked his chin. Balance is such a vague term when referring to something like the Force. I cannot speak for the Force, yet I agree with you that both Jedi and Sith, in my time as well as now, are not balanced. Then what is? Have you covered the ancient history of the Order? He asked as he tapped his chin, and I nodded in affirmative. Good. Then you know of the Jedi, the forerunners of the Jedi Order. Again, I nodded. From my studies, while living, and while using the Force to explore the past, I have come to realize that while still flawed, they were still closer to what I think balance within the Force is meant to be. Everyone has good and bad, light and dark, within them. Even the greatest Jedi can fall into the dark, or the darkest Sith bathe in the light. Yet finding a way to accept both sides, to give and take, help and hinder, love and hate, without allowing the extremes to control you is difficult. That is true for everyone, I stated. What he was saying made sense to me and seemed to agree with my own opinions on what balance in the Force meant, but it was still just an idea that was floating around in my head. Not a philosophy that I was willing to push onto others. Yes, it is. However, those with a deeper connection to the Force have access to abilities and powers beyond the normal. We can give and take from what many believe to be the very energy of the universe itself. The Force exists in almost every living thing, yet most fail to even realize that they exist in symbiosis with it. That without it, we are less than we should be. I grimaced at another vague explanation. After a year in the temple, I was sick to death of them. Is balance possible? Revan smiled and held his arms wide. If it was not, I would not be here. He chortled as I felt my face contort into a frown. Have the Order told you about Force ghosts? In passing, but they speak of them as nothing more than visions given to others by the Force. Revan sighed and shook his head. How narrow-minded. He locked his eyes on mine as he continued. I am me, I retain my memories of my life, good and bad, joy and pain. Yet I am a part of the Force. A Force ghost has not only recognized the good and bad within themselves but has accepted that both parts make them more than either does alone. I was Jedi and Sith, Savior and Conqueror. While I regret many of my actions as both Jedi and Sith, I accept that they were mine and mine alone. This is, to me, why I became one with the Force, and why no Force user from either of the main orders has achieved this state in nearly 1,000 years. I nodded as he spoke, finding wisdom in his words, even if the more metaphysical aspects of it went right over my head. So, the Chosen One prophesy is wrong. At least is how the Jedi and Sith view it. Yes, the Sith have their version of this, the Sithari. The perfect being, free of limits, who will destroy them but remake them stronger than ever before. That sounds just as nuts as the Jedi's view on the Chosen One, I muttered as I processed what Revan had said. And could fit any number of Sith, past and present. The same as the Chosen One could fit Jedi, past and present. Revan continued with a wide smile. It has been so long since I have spoken to another that understood the inherent failings of both Sith and Jedi. It is liberating, he stated with a grin. So, what should I do? I probed, wondering if this Force ghost, my great-grandfather and a former Jedi and Sith, would have if not answers, then suggestions. Be true to yourself, he replied as he squatted down so we were almost eye to eye. I am not yet willing to help you, you are after all not truly my progeny, yet you are. He gave me a lopsided grin as he continued. Since I became one with Force, you are the first whom I have witnessed that has the potential to make the changes I feel are needed. The Furs. To possibly understand things as I do. He stood and stepped backwards, into the wall. Walk your path, know yourself and do what you need to do. Wait, I called out as he began to fade. There's so much more I want to ask you. Things you could teach me. There is, he agreed with a small chuckle, but I am not sure if you are worthy of my time. Maybe I shall teach you if you prove to be so one day. We shall see. I watched open-mouthed as he faded away to nothing. Son of a bitch, I muttered once I was alone again. I met Revan. A smile crept onto my face. Even if nothing he had said helped me or explained things beyond my thoughts about the Force, I had just spoken directly to Revan, the prodigal knight and Sith Lord. Now, how do I go about getting him to come back? Quest alert. The promise of the fallen, prove yourself to the one who was known as Revan. Rating. B objectives. Rewards. Failure. Accept. Yes, no, that was unexpected. The Force, or at least the Force ghost of your ancestor, has found a way to grant you quests. Though as you can see, the details are hidden. An outside power creating quests without our consent has only happened a handful of times across the entire multiverse. Now, we could show you what is hidden, but truthfully, we are curious about where this will go. Thus, we will not. Good luck. I felt my mouth fall open at both the quest and the comment for the PTB. Revan had found a way, probably with help from the Force, to generate a quest for me, but I had no clear path as to how to complete it or the timeframe involved. Still, this had potential. Perhaps Revan knew something that could help me with what was to come. Perhaps lost techniques or technologies, or something else that I could use to help me in the future. Though first, I had to get back to the entrance. After quickly checking that there was nothing on the ground I had missed, I set off at a brisk walk back towards the cave entrance. Ah, I muttered as I came upon the entrance, and saw it had frozen over. That might be an issue to others, but to me, it wasn't, so I used teleport to appear on the other side. Criff, are you trying to give us heart attacks, Bantha Brain? Gasti spat out, her hand coming to her chest. Sorry, but would you have preferred I blasted the ice apart, and thus risk injuring you? I replied with a smirk aimed at John. While such an event wouldn't have harmed him as he was a good 30 meters away, I couldn't resist the dig threat. We are just glad you are safe, initiate Sean, Baltar Swan stated as she stepped forward. Did you retrieve a crystal? I gave her a small nod as I pulled the 2 min crystals from my pocket and showed them to her. 2 actually. That is, unusual, she said slowly as she looked down at the 2. They look viable, however we will consult with Professor Huyong once back aboard the Crucible. I slipped the crystals back into my pocket as she walked towards the temple entrance into where the starship was parked and ignored the glare John was sending my way. You just have to be different, don't you? Durid asked as we followed the Padawan. I don't plan these things, Durid. They just happen. Durid chortled and shook his head. Yes, they do. To you. He placed a hand on my shoulder to get me to stop and open up a little distance between us and the rest of the initiates. Cam, you need to be careful. John told Padawan Swan about your actions towards him. I tried to defend you, but she will report this to the council. I sighed and turned my head to meet his eyes. I know, but he had it coming. And I was right about the voices. Really? What did you find? His leku shifted and brightened in color as his eyes widened at my answer. I sighed. It's personal, and I'm not sure how to describe it until I speak to someone with a better understanding of force-induced imagery. The leku dulled. Ah, right, so did you find a crystal? I asked, changing the topic and listening while he talked about how he found his crystal as we walked across the surface of Ilum and onto the Crucible. A chime rang out through the meditation chamber I was in and I opened my eyes. It had been 5 days since Ilum, 4 spent on the Crucible traveling back to the temple and another in private meditation, where I was meant to commune with the Force, regarding my Jedi Master. However, even though I was sent for private meditation, the Council of First Knowledge hadn't told me their decision about my Master before instructing me to meditate. Not that I had meditated, and after a day in here, I called up the various notices in my log from the last 24 hours. Force power leveled up. Force attune X14. Force power discovered. Negate hunch. Allows a force sensitive to use the force itself to negate their need to eat and drink. Force power leveled up. Restore stamina. Force power discovered. Levitation, the ability to lift and potentially move yourself using just the force. Force attune was nothing more than the ability to attune an object with a connection to the force to myself, though, unlike every other force power I had discovered so far, it did not seem to gradually increase in power potential as it leveled. Instead, it stayed at the flat rate of 2% per hour towards attuning an object. I hoped it increased the rate once I got to Adept, otherwise attuning anything was going to take about 2 days per object. Negate hunger lowered more than negated my hunger, but it was, potentially, one of the most powerful force abilities I could think of. Currently, it would only stop me from having to eat for a day, but I imagined that would increase as the power leveled up, to potentially reach a point where I could go without eating for years, if not forever. Restore stamina was like negate hunger and one I had discovered in the months after the initiate trials. It was already into the adept tier and simply worked to restore my stamina. Perhaps this power and negate hunger, at much higher levels, would lead to another force power that could slow, if not stop, aging. Though I was not dwelling on the implications of that, as the idea of being functionally immortal was exciting and terrifying in equal measure. I suspected that some combination of these powers, and whatever might come from them later, explained why Faye looked not a day over 21, yet was a few centuries old, at least. Levitation seemed a pointless power at first, as it only allowed me to rise half a meter off the ground and I couldn't do anything more than that. But, based on its short description, I hoped that at higher levels it would allow me something akin to self-flight. The issue with discovering that was it was my joint most expensive power outright along with teleport. Though imagining how insanely dangerous, powerful, useful those two powers were, it did make sense that they were harder to learn, use than anything else I currently knew. I'd only considered the power in the last hour after the second crystal was attuned, but this was going to be handy power to train during those hour-plus sessions where I had to meditate on the force. Slowly I stood and stretched. A full day in one place should have left me with a few cramps, but I didn't feel any. I suspected that this was because of player's body, but I still stretched to make it look like I was just as normal as everyone around me. Sure, the room was meant to be empty, but I suspected that there was a camera somewhere to keep an eye out in case anyone inside somehow hurt themselves. Or record any conversations that took place in the rooms. The doors opened and a short, blue-skinned Duros stepped inside, his black, almost soulless-looking eyes fixed on me. Initiate Sean, I am Padawan Naidu Zam. I have been instructed to escort you to the Council of First Knowledge. The tone of her voice was the only way I could tell she was female, and I nodded in acquiescence. The walk through the halls was done in silence, and we soon exited the elevator to the atrium outside the council chamber, where I activated both enhanced stat for charisma and enhanced skill for persuasion. I initiate Sean, welcome, Master Vilbum stated with a small smile that was in danger of being buried under the wrinkles that covered his skin. The other members looked around at me as I entered. Please, take a seat. I sat on the small stool that was in the center of the room and waited. I knew I was here to hear if I would gain Dooku, Fair both as my Jedi Master, trainer and figured it was better to wait and appear humble than blurt out a question and seem arrogant. Ah, patience in a youngling. So, refreshing, commented Master Gallia with a small smile. Yes, though I suspect he is just doing this to not seem curious about our decision. Master D countered with a chuckle as I shrugged. At least he is smart enough to know when to speak and when to listen. He is smarter than many give him credit for, Master Neela said as she stared at me. Or at least that is how it felt, as where her eyes were covered with the same light blue cloth she always seemed to wear. The Force has a plan for him. I managed to school my features even as I frowned internally. I was still unsure what the Force felt about me, though the hints of what Revan had said made me think that it was willing to allow me to explore my own path. Yes, you have been quite clear on that point, which is why we have agreed with you. Master PL growled out without any real anger. If I may, Vilbum waited for the rest of the council to look at him before he continued. Initiate Sean, before we get to the primary reason that we have summoned you, there is an issue we need to address. We have received a report from Padawan Swan. Upon entering the Crystal Cave on Ilum, you attacked a fellow member of this order. Now, we have spoken to all other initiates that were present, but before we pass judgment, we wish to hear your side of the story. Yes, masters. For the entire trip to Ilum, Initiate Savos felt a need to mock and belittle me. Whenever I made a suggestion or questioned something we were told, he was condescending and scornful to anything I said or did. I paused and took a breath, letting go of the anger I had intentionally allowed to build within me as I spoke about John's actions. After 4 days I had reached my end and decided to deal with his verbal bullying, though the method I used was perhaps a little too aggressive. D coughed quietly at that. You used the Force to clamp his mouth shut and then threatened to do worse. That is acceptable behavior for a Jedi, snarled PL as his ears pulled back in a way that reminded me of an angry dog. No, but it was how I was taught to deal with a bully. Once you push back, they generally stop. I countered, and it was true in John's cases. After that incident, he never bad-mouthed me again, though he did still roll his eyes and whisper with a clanmate of his. While your decision to confront Padawan Savos about his behavior was correct, your methodology was flawed, Gallia spoke slowly and calmly. Yet the side-eye she gave PL suggested the two did not agree on something. Threats and violence are not the Jedi way. In future, you should try to resolve such matters in a calm and friendly manner. I had to fight off an eye roll at the apparent naivety of the Jedi Master. That approach rarely, if ever, worked with bullies. Yes ma'am, we have made a note in your file regarding this incident, as well as for Padawan Savos. Stated D as he took over. For now, we are willing to forgive your actions, but further instances of being unable to conform to the Jedi Code will result in censorship or even possible expulsion from the Order. Yes sir. I wasn't going to call them out on the fact that a few months ago they had seemingly bent over backwards to keep me in the Order. I will try to be more considerate of the behavior of others before acting. Maybe. Good. Then, for now, this matter is settled. Vilbum said. Now, when we last spoke, you stated your belief that being trained by 2 Jedi Masters was the best path for you in your continuing education as a Jedi. Do you still believe that to be the case? Yes, sir. While I am well aware of how rare, if not almost unheard of, it is for a Padawan to have 2 masters teaching them, my reasoning has not changed. Yet in the end, the final decision is yours. Vilbum nodded and smiled a fraction. Yes, it is. However, we prefer to guide the initiates and masters to each other. Generally, that happens naturally, but if the Force grants a seer a vision of a path, or is felt to be accepting of a choice, we generally do not interfere. He paused and glanced over at Neela's, as did Master D and Gallia. When we first told you of the 4 possibilities for your master, we mentioned that all 4 appeared in conflicting visions regarding you. However, what we avoided mentioning to prevent it from influencing your choice, is that of the 4 masters to appear with you in these visions, Masters Dooku and Faye both appeared more than once. My brow rose at that, even if I wondered again if the Force itself was trying to push me towards a path. Is that unusual? I asked carefully, as the idea of visions and glimpsing possible futures was not something that I was comfortable with. It is, answered Master Neela's, drawing my attention. Rarely do the same masters appear in such differing visions, or appear to be vastly different from themselves in some. Yet, it is not unheard of. I nodded slowly at the brief explanation. Force visions sound both useful and exceedingly confusing. The one common thread in these visions was you, young one. A source of light, yet touched by darkness, shining brightly over those around you. Great, more prophecy crap. This is getting ridiculous, but it does help explain why Anakin seemed so arrogant at times in the movies. Having people always say or imply you were special and destined for greatness would make almost everyone arrogant and prideful. Has this influenced the council decision? I asked, trying to steer the conversation away from talk of prophecies and vision. It has, Vilbum replied even as PL glared at Neela's, who looked far too happy with herself. We have decided to provisionally grant your request for formal training with both Master Dooku and Master Faye. We will review this decision in 2 years, but until then, as caretaker of the Council of Frist Knowledge, it is my honor and privilege to raise you to the rank of Padawan learner within our order. Congratulations. Thank you, sir, I said, trying my best to not jump for joy even as a new quest completion notice appeared in my log. Vilbum's smile grew. Both Master Dooku and Master Fei have been informed of our decision and await your confirmation of them in the temple spire. Then with your permission, I will go to them, I said as I stood. Yes, go young Padawan. I turned and walked to the door, only to stop and turn back. I bowed a touch as I spoke. May the Force be with you. And with you, child of time, Neela's replied. I slipped through the doors and entered the elevator, and as it began to move, I pulled up the most recent notices in my log. Quest completed. 2 or better than 1 user-generated objective. Convince the Council of First Knowledge that both Fei and Dooku should become your masters. Rewards. 2000 express plus 25 ranks in skill persuasion. Note, this completion is subject to reversal. If the Council of First Knowledge removes 1 or both Jedi Masters from your training, then you will lose the rewards and suffer the penalties. Rank gained. Jedi, rank 2. Padawan grants access to the Great Holocron under the watchful gaze of your Jedi Masters grants level 4 access to Temple Archives. I frowned a touch at the note that I could still fail the quest if the Council of First Knowledge reversed their decision, but it did make sense. The benefits of promotion in rank as a Jedi were nice. Especially increased access to the Jedi Archives as much of the details regarding Revan, Bastila and Satel were denied to me before, save the bland boring description of their lives. Hopefully, more details about them and other things would be open to me now. Though I noted that the increased rank said nothing about access to the Holocron vaults. I suppose I can always steal some later on, not that I will care about it for now. I added mentally to prevent a quest from being generated. Or I could just wait until I become a knight, I decided to put how to access the archives, and the vault within it, out of my mind for the moment and pulled the 2 mini crystals from my pockets, using examine on both. Ilum a Degan crystal, miniature, attuned, Cameron Shan, a Kyber crystal from the caves on the planet Ilum. This crystal, while capable of being used as a focus for the Force, is too small to be used in a lightsaber. It has been attuned to work better with Cameron Shan. HP, 5 value, 3000 credits, power leveled up. Examine 5/10, examine now also displays. Energy value of an object. Force potential of a sentient. Ilum a Degan crystal, miniature, attuned, Cameron Shan, a Kyber crystal from the caves on the planet Ilum. This crystal, while capable of being used as a focus for the Force, is too small to be used in a lightsaber. It has been attuned to work better with Cameron Shan. HP, 5 value, 3000 credits energy value, 100, the level up to examine was nice, not least as it was the only player power I could level up, even if it had only gone up 5 levels in 5 days. Currently, the power told me the value, hit points and energy value for an object in the name, race, level, health and force potential along with a short description for organics and droids, though I had yet to use the power on anything living for fear a Jedi would detect it. The cost also varied depending on the target, from 5 to 10 pp. With my pp only being 20, that limited my ability to level it up rapidly by abusing it as honestly, my mind had been on getting the 2 lightsaber crystals attuned so I could build my lightsaber. I frowned as I tried to work out what energy value was, even as I slid the 2 crystals back into my pocket. Force potential was obvious, though I was curious about how it rated things and used examine on myself. Cameron Shan, the player, race, human level, 10 health, 100% force potential, very high. Note, asterisk implies that the target has another name designation. At your current level of examine, this only is visible if you know someone has another identity. Note, no description is given for the player, as that would be redundant. Once I level out this power, I'll be able to tell when people have a hidden identity. Wicked. That, combined with force potential, should give me a chance to discover who Palpatine's master is. Provided the person in question is still alive. That was going to be handy, and learning my force potential was very high was a little bit of an ego boost, but it made sense since I'd taken Force Prodigy when I'd created this new life. I allowed a small smile to creep onto my face as the elevator stopped and I began to walk over to the temple spire, the central and largest of the 5 spires in the Jedi Temple. I'd been surprised that the High Council didn't sit atop that tower, but in retrospect it made sense. The Jedi were not meant to be prideful, so having the grandest tower for meditation, special occasions and to mark the history of the Order. The peak of the mountain the temple was built upon was also contained within this spire, yet I knew the corruption of the temple couldn't be here as Jedi passed by this point every day. If it was corrupted, someone would have noticed long before I arrived. After asking one of the temple guards for their exact location, I found Dooku and Fei sitting in one of the smaller chambers on the veranda. Since the door was open, I entered quietly and began to speak, only to hear another voice. The attack on Coruscant caught the Order off guard and many of my fellow Jedi fell that day, including Master Venzalo, who died defending the temple from Darth Malgus. His actions allowed many of the younglings to escape into the lower levels of the temple and hide in the depths of Coruscant. Fei and Dooku were both sitting as a woman projected from a holocron spoke. The holocron was different from others I had seen in the temple when a master had brought one out for teaching. Those had all been blue cubes in shape, but this one was bronze and gold in color and appeared to be two diamonds joined together in shape. The woman speaking was old, easily in her 70s based on the silver hair that ended in two short ponytails that rested on her shoulders, and lines around her eyes, yet she stood tall and confident. Her voice sounded familiar, and as I examined her face and stance, and spotted what appeared to be a saber staff on her waist, Faye noticed me. "Ah, our new Padawan, welcome," she said with a smile as Dooku turned to face me, though not before touching the surface of the holocron to stop the recording. "Sorry for interrupting, but the door was open, and the Council of First Knowledge told me to report to you," I explained as my eyes struggled to not look at the woman in the hologram. "We have been expecting you," Dooku stated calmly. "The Council informed you of their decision and you accept, I presume?" "Yes, sir. I am grateful for their, and your, agreement with my choices." I bowed a touch and Faye laughed softly. "There is no need to bow, child. The Force willed it that we are brought together." She paused and gave Dooku a sad smile. Neither Master Dooku nor I had planned to take another Padawan learner, yet here we both are. Indeed, after what happened with my last Padawan, I had no interest in taking another, yet the Force reacted unexpectedly in this instance. Yet I cannot bring myself to disagree with its intent. Dooku added in agreement. "Still, thank you both. The only one to thank is the Force," stated Faye as she waved my thanks and turned to look at the hologram. You seem curious about the woman. Why is that?" she asked with a smirk that hinted she knew who the person was. "She seems familiar, yet I don't think I have ever seen her before," I replied as my brow creased as I raked my memories, yet not even photographic memory could tell me anything about her, save I had seen her face in my old life. Obviously, that meant I probably hadn't seen her face anytime in the last 5 years, as it was only after that the perk could fail. Or it could be that thing was intentionally blocking the information to get a reaction. Maybe, then allow me to introduce you to Grandmaster Satel Shan. You're great, and so on, niece," Faye said with a gentle laugh as she waved her hand over the holocron and my brow rose into my hair. "Greetings, fellow Jedi, may I ask your name?" Satel Shan, or the recording of her anyway, asked with a small smile. Cameron Shan," I said slowly, wishing I'd turned on Player's mind, but since the incident in the Crystal Caves, I had become reluctant to use the power. After thinking over the strange behavior of Jedi me, I realized that he meant that because of Player's mind, I could become the perfect, emotionless being that the current Jedi strove to be. Satel frowned and leaned closer. "And who was your mother?" I frowned in return as this holocron recording was acting differently from the two I had taken when I'd left home. Though those were used as a diary training tool, this one was a recording for future generations, yet the fact both Faye and Dooku leaned closer at the question told me something was up. "Jedi Knight Ressa Shan." Satel's head tilted to her left. "And what is your rank?" "Padawan. Rank insufficient. Access denied. Facial features and voice pattern recorded for future reference," Satel stated as her image flicked. "What the muttered as the image returned to the one that had first asked me for my name. I turned and looked at the two Jedi Masters. Was that meant to happen? "No, that was unexpected," Dooku replied slowly as Faye waved her hand over the holocron, turning it off. "More like unheard of," Faye countered as she picked up the device and stared at it carefully. "Grandmaster Shan's holocron has always asked for a user's name, but I have never heard of it asking those other questions. Perhaps Master Yoda or an archivist would know if such a thing has happened before." "So, what was meant to happen?" My curiosity was pipped. Was there something on that holocron that was meant for my eyes only? Generally, a personal holocron, like that of Grandmaster Shan, will serve as a record of what has been and grant a Jedi insight into how our order behaved during that Jedi's lifetime. Occasionally, they also provide training of rarer Force abilities," explained Dooku as he stroked his beard slowly. "That was why I had brought it here today," added Faye as she slid the holocron into her pocket. "I had hoped that she could provide you with pointers on battle meditation." "What?" I asked, trying to play dumb, even as I tried not to jump for joy internally at learning the Force ability that Bastilla used in KOTOR. "Nice try, but we can sense you know something of the power," Faye said with a smile, having sensed my internal reaction. I needed to learn to block my emotions mind from reading without always resorting to Player's mind. "I learned stories about my great-grandmother and what she could do before I became a Jedi," I said slowly, trying to fudge the truth enough that the two Jedi Masters wouldn't think I was lying. "And what stories were those?" I turned to Dooku to answer him. "That she could influence the outcome of a battle with just the Force. Instill hope in one side and despair to the other before a battle even started. That is the basis of the ability, though a Jedi should not use fear," Faye replied with the faintest of smiles. "Your family was famous for its ability to use battle meditation, though that drove the Sith to actively seek out and kill your family line. Like the attack on my home," I blurted out as why the Sith had attacked finally made sense. "Well, beyond a power greater than the Force wishing it. When my grandfather contacted the Jedi about my Force potential, the Sith somehow became aware and moved to take me. Indeed, though if they could not take you, I suspect they would have killed you to prevent the Jedi of the time from taking you in," Dooku said calmly, though the tone sent a shiver up my spine and how calmly he spoke of my death to my face. So, you think that I can learn battle meditation? I asked, moving the conversation away from discussions about my possible death. That is my hope, yet neither I nor Master Dooku have any training with the ability, Faye stated. I had planned to introduce the idea into your head before we spoke to Master Rancisis, the Order's current master of the ability. Since you already know of what it is, perhaps we should now speak to him. I bowed in acceptance of her suggestion and moved to walk behind the two senior Jedi. You are our Padawan, not an initiate. Walk at our side, Dooku commanded gently, and I moved quickly to his right side. How do you expect to learn from us if you only observe our backs? Faye asked with a chuckle as I felt my cheeks heat up at her, knowing my eyes had wandered lower than they should have. If I may, how exactly is my training to be handled? I asked after regaining control of my blush. Master Faye and I have discussed this greatly over the last week, Dooku began as I turned my head just enough to be able to see his face without losing sight of where we were going. Currently, I am assigned as a lightsaber instructor while Master Faye is disinterested in spending a large amount of time on Coruscant. As such, we believe that rotating your training with us, say half a year each, is the best approach for now. I hope to convince Master Dooku to leave the planet, but for now, he is committed to training others Makashi. Your basic instruction in the form to your former clanmates has given him a base to work from which he remiss in not using. Faye added with a wink, and I internally groaned. By teaching the others in Dragon Clan, I had made Dooku less interested in joining Faye and me in exploring the galaxy. Thus, leaving him within easy reach of Palpatine. Who will I train with first? Master Faye will handle your training initially. Though I think we will stay in the temple until your birthday. This should provide you with adequate time to say your goodbyes to your clanmates. I have no issues with that, I replied as my birthday was less than 2 weeks away. Then I'd finally get out of the damn temple and get to explore the galaxy. Excellent. Ah, we're here. Faye waved her hand over a panel on the door and it opened a moment later. As we entered, I saw the long snake-like body of Master Rancisis sitting peacefully on a large chair. Greetings my fellow Jedi, please come in, he said with a wave of his hand, and I had to fight off a shudder at the length of the nails on his fingers. I was sure those were more than just a cultural choice and could do serious damage if needed. Before we begin, I wish to make one thing clear, Padawan, the High Council member said as he locked his eyes on me. I am unsure about teaching the art of battle meditation to On. So young, and new to our order. Yet Master Faye was able to convince enough of the High Council to at least see if, based on your family line, you could learn this ability. Thus, I have consented to instruct you in the basics. Thank you, sir, I said with a small bow, even as mentally thanked Faye and wondered if more of the High Council were against me learning advanced powers. Perhaps they felt I was learning too much too quickly, or that I might somehow threaten their beliefs. Now, before we begin, you have spoken with Grandmaster Shan's recording regarding what battle mediation is. He has not, Dooku stated, cutting me off from replying. It appears that the young Padawan already knew about the ability from stories told to him about Bastila Shan. What he knows is truthful, if colored by non-Jedi thinking. Well, perhaps I should explain fully what battle meditation is and allows, Rancisis said as his long, bony fingers stroked his beard. Battle meditation is the ability to influence a conflict to achieve the result desired by the user by manipulating the emotions and abilities of those fighting, either by boosting their resolve and capacities while doing the opposite to their opponents. While it is an ability that has rarely been needed over my lifetime, it can alter the flow of entire wars if the user is mentally strong enough to wield it. The only true drawback is that to fully use this ability, you must submerge yourself in a deep trance within the Force. This means that you will feel everyone you touch, their fear, pain, even their deaths. It can be discomforting and result in you losing control. I nodded along as Rancisis spoke and ignored the new power notice in my log until I thought popped into my head. Sir, is there a form of this ability that would allow a user to use it while active? From the stories I was told, Bastila had to meditate away from a battle, thus she would have been unable to defend herself. Or take an active role in the conflict. I added in my head. I wasn't going to say it out loud on the chance the Jedi thought I wished to seek battle. Truthfully, I was more concerned about the fact that using this power would leave me vulnerable to assassins. There are records, from before even your time, of a handful of Jedi Masters who were able to use battle meditation while actively engaged in conflict. However, they note that the effects and range of their power were far less than when used in a meditative trance. Understood, I said as I noted a second new power alert in my log. If you have no more questions, I shook my head. Good. Begin to meditate and listen to my voice, follow my instructions and we will see if you are ready to learn. I folded my legs under me in the typical way one does to meditate as Rancisis pulled his coiled body close and sank into the coils, and Faye and Dooku sat down on either side of me. Reach out with your mind, try to sense the minds of myself and Masters Faye and Dooku. It was weird to reach out through the Force, like pushing through both fog and water at once, yet I could easily sense the presence of the 3 Jedi Masters within the water-like fog. Each of them had a different aura to them. 2 were old, though one was more vibrant, colorful, while the other was duller. Okay, not dull, just less lively. The young aura was much like the duller aura, yet it wasn't as bland. Good. Now, brush against our minds. Be gentle though, as the stronger one is with their connection to the Force, the easier it will be for them to prevent you from touching even the edge of their mind. I let my senses touch the most colorful of the auras and heard Faye gasp quietly. It made sense that Faye's aura was the most colorful as she seemed the most outgoing, emotional of the three Jedi. Now knowing which of the auras was Faye's, and having an idea of which of the other two was which, I touched the aura of the youngest and heard Dooku inhale sharply. When I tried to touch Rances's aura, I failed. It felt like something was stopping me from making the connection. I can't touch your mind, Master Rances's. It's too hard, I said after failing a few more times to make a connection and realizing that the power was not strong enough yet to allow me to touch more than two minds. That is all right, young one. I can sense you have managed to brush against the minds of my fellow masters. Now, to them I want you to project hope, confidence, and belief. I nodded even though I was sure his eyes were closed like mine and did as he ordered. Both Faye and Dooku seemed to resist for a moment, I suspected due to their minds rebelling at the intrusion before they let me in. I tried to make them feel better, and more certain about themselves. It is weak, but I can feel his touch boosting my judgment, Faye whispered before gasping quietly, and I thought I heard her move around a little. This is different from what I expected. Yes, this sense of certainty in myself. It is empowering, Dooku added with a hitch in his voice. Good, very good, Cameron. Now hold the connections for as long as you can. Keep giving them hope and belief in themselves. I did as Rances said, but soon enough I felt the link fail. I gasped as I opened my eyes. I'm sorry, that was all I could manage, I muttered as I regained my bearings. Having the link fail suddenly was jarring, and a glance to either side showed me that the effect was felt by both Faye and Dooku. That is quite alright, Cameron. This is a powerful but exhausting ability, stated Rances with a soothing tone that was at ends with him looking like a giant snake. That you were able to use it at all at your young age is most impressive. His head tilted to the left as his claws quietly made ripples in his beard. It will get easier with practice, so perhaps attempting to use this while you meditate will help. Though be careful with whose minds you attempt to link to. Many within the order enjoy their privacy. Yes, sir. That now meant I had two power I could use while meditating, which made me smile a touch. Having something I could train during that time for something was a relief, as it was 3 hours each day that had been wasted until now. Rances uncoiled his body and stretched upwards, which was taken as a sign to stand, and glanced past me. Excellent. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a meeting to attend, he said before slithering past, and I noted the clock above the door. I must also take my leave, Dooku stated with a small bow to Faye after seeing the time. I have a class to instruct. Should I attend? I asked as I had nothing else to do. No, my young Padawan. This is for the younglings. It would be a waste of your time to attempt to learn from such a class. I will be free at 4 o'clock. If you are available, I would be willing to instruct you in more advanced techniques for Makashi. I will try to be free then, sir. No way was I going to pass up one-on-one training with Dooku until I had maxed out Makashi. Heck, I might still take the sessions to learn more about him and try to prevent his joining the Sith. As he left, I turned to Faye and glanced at the flashing new power alerts I remembered the first quest one had received when I entered the temple. Before I even spoke, she cocked her head to the side and smiled. You have something you wish to ask? I nodded once and managed to prevent a frown at how easily she could sense my intentions. There must be a force power to block that, but I didn't think any of the ones I currently had would do that. Yes, when we spoke before, in the archives, you mentioned how the temple felt decaying. I paused and closed my eyes, hoping she didn't suspect I was lying as I spoke again. Well, after that, I felt something under me. Under the temple, something wrong. That may well be the planet itself that you sense. I feel it occasionally. This whole world is dying. It is slow, but because I stay away from it and have lived a long time, I can sense it. I frowned at her, seeming to dismiss my concern, while I ignored the urge to ask her how old she was. I wasn't making that mistake with a lady again. That might be it, however. I paused and looked at the floor. What I sense seems to come from directly below the temple. From the mountain itself. She gently tapped a single finger against her chin. I had not considered that the problem with the temple was the nexus itself. Nexus. That word was mentioned in the quest regarding dormant cause but not the Jedi Temple, but I hadn't given it any thought beyond the general meaning of the word. A force nexus is exactly what it sounds like. A place, be it a room, mountain or even a planet, which is strong with the force. They draw force sensitives to them. The mountain on which this great temple is built is one, or at least part of it is. And you think that what I sensed was a problem with this nexus? I asked her, even if internally I was all but certain that there was. It is possible, but I do not know much about the older levels. She turned to look me in the eye. I know there is something you are not telling me, yet the force seems to be guiding me to accept what you say. Most interesting. I try to be. I smirked, which drew a chuckle from her. Yes, that you do. She ruffled my hair as she smiled before she began to walk away, and I forced myself to keep my eyes on the back of her head. She paused in the doorframe and turned back. Come along, Padawan. The temple records will not read themselves and I had no interest in doing so alone. Yes, master. I moved quickly to her side and we walked towards the elevator in silence. Once inside, I subtly opened the new notices. Force power discovered. Battle meditation passive, the ability to alter the course of a battle by instilling hope and belief or sowing fear in those around you while in a meditative trance. Force power discovered. Battle meditation active, the ability to alter the course of a battle by instilling hope and belief or sowing fear in those around you while actively engaged in the battle. Warning. Battle meditation active is locked until battle meditation passive reaches Savon. 1. Nice. 2 new powers, though I'll have to wait a while to even begin to train the second one. I casually waved away the notices and silently prayed that looking through the records wouldn't take too long so that I could build my lightsaber.